Some movies scare us, but a few leave a lasting scar. The Exorcist was more than just a horror film. It was a descent into darkness that spilled over into reality. Even before filming began, those involved could feel something unnatural lurking. And by the end, few were untouched by the shadows that seemed to follow them home. This is the story of a curse that still haunts those who dared to bring this nightmare to life. It started with fire, a blaze so intense it swallowed the set whole. One night, the set of The Exorcist erupted in flames, burning everything except one room. Of all places, the flames avoided the one room where the demon was supposed to live. How could it be that only the bedroom remained untouched? Cast and crew were shaken. Whispers of something unnatural began to circulate. Fear took hold. Was it an accident, or had they awoken something? But the fire was only the beginning. Jack McGowan, who played Burke Dennings, died suddenly from pneumonia just days after he completed his work on the film. Soon after, Vasiliki Maliaros, who portrayed Father Karras' ailing mother, also passed. They were both characters who died in the film, and both lives taken in reality. To play a part in The Exorcist was to walk hand in hand with fate. Was this just tragic coincidence, or something far darker? Then there was Linda Blair, the young actress at the heart of the horror. She was only a child, but what she endured would leave scars she'd carry for a lifetime. During the infamous bed scene, an equipment malfunction flung her violently across the room. Her scream, echoing in the film, was not of fear, but of real, agonizing pain. But the curse didn't stop with her injuries. Following the film's release, Linda became a target of harassment, even death threats from strangers, some accusing her of inviting evil by playing such a role. In her own words, she felt hunted. Ellen Burstyn, who played Reagan's mother, would also pay a price. In one terrifying scene, she's thrown across the room by her possessed daughter. What the cameras captured was far from staged. That scream was real, a shriek of agony as her back cracked against the floor. She begged for the scene to be shot differently, but the cameras kept rolling. That moment of suffering became forever enshrined in the film, a real injury embedded in this story of horror. Fears were now beginning to consume the set, and rumors of a curse could no longer be ignored. To ease the cast's anxiety, director William Friedkin brought in a priest to bless the set. As he walked the hallways, sprinkling holy water, silence fell. Some found comfort, others claimed that the blessing only fueled the curse, angering whatever spirit might have been watching. When The Exorcist finally premiered, its grip on the audience was immediate and overwhelming. People reported fainting, vomiting, even collapsing from fear. And then there was the heart attack. One moviegoer in New York was watching the exorcism scene when he suddenly slumped in his seat, lifeless. A heart attack, right there in the theater. From then on, people said that watching The Exorcist was an invitation to darkness. But what about those who created The Exorcist? William Friedkin and writer William Peter Blatty had both courted this darkness, but neither was left unscarred. Blatty would later speak of his unease, confessing that some stories should be left untold. And Friedkin? Some say he never truly escaped the film's grip. He'd brought horror to life, but at what cost? For both men, The Exorcist was no longer just a film. It was a haunting, a chapter they couldn't close. As the final scene was filmed, the cast breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the dread lingered. When they left, many spoke of nightmares, accidents, and illnesses that continued long after the cameras stopped. For some, The Exorcist was not a film they made. but one that marked them, an unshakable shadow. So, was the exorcist truly cursed? Or was it a combination of fear and coincidence? As each cast member faced their own torment, we're left with questions that linger. Did they awaken something while making The Exorcist, or did they simply shine a light on the darkness already within us?
Uncovering the dark secrets, Salem witchcraft trials, and haunted legends. Did you know that more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials? But how did these accusations spread so quickly? Today, I am uncovering the dark secrets of Salem, the witch trials, and their haunted legacy. In 1692, an air of suspicion and fear swept through the town of Salem, Massachusetts. It was a time when the lines between reality and superstition blurred, leading to one of the darkest chapters in American history, the Salem witch trials. Innocent lives were lost, hysteria took over, and to this day, the town remains haunted by its past and by those whose voices were silenced. But what really happened during those harrowing months? Why did a town turn against its own? Salem in the late 1600s was a deeply religious, isolated community. The Puritans, who had fled religious persecution in England, lived in constant fear of the devil's influence. Winters were harsh, food was scarce, and the threat of disease and attacks from neighboring Native American tribes loomed large. In such an environment, fear festered. It took just one spark to ignite the flames of hysteria. It all began in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, when his niece Abigail Williams and daughter Betty started displaying disturbing behavior. No one could explain their fits, and soon, rumors of witchcraft spread like wildfire. Fear took root, and suspicion spread through the town like a plague. The first to be accused was Tituba, an enslaved woman from Barbados. It's said that under pressure, she confessed to using dark magic, fueling the fears that the devil had infiltrated the town. Following her confession, two other women, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, were also accused. Their only crime? Being outcasts in the rigid Puritan society. None of these women were witches, but in the eyes of Salem, they became scapegoats for the town's growing paranoia. The more they pleaded for their innocence, the more people turned against them. These accusations tore apart families, pitted neighbor against neighbor, and dragged Salem into a fevered nightmare. In a matter of months, the accusations spiraled out of control. Ordinary women, mothers, daughters, and wives were dragged before the court. The trials were a mockery of justice. Evidence was based on dreams, visions, and spectral appearances, where the spirit of the accused was said to torment the victims, and the so-called afflicted, mostly young girls, would scream and collapse in fits, claiming the accused were cursing them. Rebecca Nurse, a pious, elderly woman, was dragged to trial. Her crime? Simply being accused. No one was safe. Martha Corey, an outspoken critic of the trials, was accused by her own husband. Families were torn apart by the poison of suspicion. The trials culminated in brutal executions. 19 people were hanged on Gallows Hill, crying out their innocence with their final breaths. Among them was John Proctor, a respected farmer who had dared to criticize the trials. His wife, Elizabeth, was also accused, but her execution was delayed because she was pregnant. The injustice reached its peak with Giles Corey. Refusing to enter a plea, Corey was pressed to death under heavy stones. His defiance became a symbol of resistance, but his death, like the others, left deep scars on the conscience of Salem. By the time the trials ended in 1693, 25 people were dead, either hanged, crushed, or from the harsh conditions of prison. It wasn't until years later that those involved began to express regret. Judge Samuel Sewall, one of the key figures, publicly confessed to his role in the tragedy. The damage, however, was done. The Salem witch trials had left an indelible mark on history, and the town of Salem would never be the same again. Today, Salem is a town where history and legend intertwine. Visitors come to explore its haunted past, walking the same streets where the accused once lived. Some say the spirits of those wrongfully condemned still linger, restless and seeking justice. Is Salem truly haunted by ghosts, or is it haunted by its own dark legacy? The Salem witch trials serve as a reminder of the dangers of hysteria, scapegoating, and mob mentality. It was a time when fear overpowered reason, and innocent lives were lost because of it. More than 300 years later, the lessons of Salem remain relevant. As you walk through the town today, you can still feel the weight of its tragic past, a place forever haunted, not just by the ghosts of its victims, but by the collective guilt of a town that turned on its own.
Ghosts in the Stanley Hotel, the history behind the hauntings and why it's so infamous. Nestled high in the Rocky Mountains, the Stanley Hotel stands, grand and alluring. But this is no ordinary historic getaway. For over a century, people have flocked here, not just for the breathtaking views or elegant halls, but for something far darker. They come in search of the unknown, hoping to encounter the infamous ghosts that haunt these halls. Welcome to the Stanley Hotel, where the past refuses to rest. Imagine walking these storied halls, feeling a chill that isn't from the mountain air. Many visitors report experiences they can't explain. But of all the eerie tales told here, which one is the most horrifying? Stick around to the end to uncover the terrifying incident that left even the most skeptical guests shaken, and has continued to haunt the Stanley's legacy ever since. Origins of Hauntings, a troubled history beneath the grandeur. The story begins in 1909 with F.O. Stanley, a man driven to conquer illness. He saw the hotel as his legacy, a grand symbol of hope. Yet his story has since evolved into something darker. Ironically, Stanley himself was not one to believe in ghosts, at least not in his lifetime. And yet, many claim to see his apparition, dressed in period clothing, lingering near his beloved piano in the music room. Is it truly the spirit of F.O. Stanley? Or is something else keeping him bound to the hotel? Guests often speak of an inexplicable sense of dread, a feeling like they're stepping into a place frozen in time. And while no major tragedy stains the hotel's history, whispers persist that the illness driving Stanley to the mountains left its mark, drawing spirits to the very place meant to bring healing. The legends, ghostly encounters in Room 217 and beyond. Room 217 has a story all its own, thanks to Stephen King. It was here that he spent a sleepless night, a night that inspired The Shining. King reported a sensation of intense dread and claimed he saw a young boy in old-fashioned clothing, wandering the hall. But King's encounter was only the beginning. There are tales of apparitions, spirits that move items, knock on doors, even whisper into guests' ears in the dead of night. One spirit, Elizabeth Wilson, a chambermaid who suffered a near-fatal accident in Room 217, is rumored to still linger, her ghostly hands unpacking suitcases, folding clothes, and tidying rooms. But not every encounter is so benign. A dark shadow figure, often seen near the bed in Room 217, is said to be menacing. Those who encounter it describe a pressure on their chest, like the spirit is draining their energy. Could Elizabeth's spirit be protective? Or is something else, something darker, trying to warn guests? The haunted tours, when curiosity becomes fear. The Stanley capitalizes on its reputation with popular ghost tours, but be warned, the tales shared on these tours might leave you with more questions than answers. Paranormal enthusiasts, daring to stray from the tour guide's path, report eerie encounters. One group ventured into the underground tunnels, only to hear whispers in a strange language. They turned on their flashlights but saw nothing, until one of them felt a cold tug at his jacket. Later, he found scratches on his arm, faintly forming letters. Was it a warning? The lesser-known hauntings, shadows in the staircase, and unseen musicians. Room 217 may grab the spotlight, but the hotel has other, more secretive areas where ghostly encounters are frequent. Guests report faint piano music drifting down the grand staircase. Many say it's Flora Stanley, serenading guests with a final farewell. But there's another, even more terrifying presence. A faceless woman, dressed in white, slowly ascending the staircase. As guests follow, she vanishes, leaving behind only an icy chill on their shoulders. Then there's the infamous Red Hall. Guests describe finding a dim hallway with blood-red carpets and walls. It seems to stretch endlessly until it suddenly ends, with no door in sight. Those who've entered this hall report hearing footsteps behind them, only to find empty space. They say if you linger too long, you'll start hearing your own voice whispering words you've never said. Is it a trick of the mind? Or is the Stanley revealing itself to those who dare to seek its mysteries? A visit that lingers, haunted memories and unsolved mysteries. For some, a stay at the Stanley doesn't end when they leave. Guests of room 401 report flickering lights, shadowy figures, and unseen presences that seem to follow them home. One couple found their house lights mysteriously flickering, as though an unseen visitor had joined them. A guest reported her suitcase moving across her room unassisted after returning home. Could it be that those who seek the ghosts become marked by the hotel, forever haunted by their encounter? Guests describe an irresistible urge to return to the Stanley, but not all come back willingly. Some report dreams of unfamiliar rooms, filled with strange, whispering voices. And for those bold enough to revisit the hotel, they claim the spirits remember them, offering a chilling, "Welcome back." Legends and mysteries unresolved. The ghosts in the Stanley Hotel have built a reputation, making it one of America's most haunted places. But what makes these hauntings so unique? Why do some have friendly encounters, while others feel an overpowering sense of dread? Is it the energy left by generations of guests fueling these spirits? Or something even deeper at play? And now the answer but of all the eerie tales told here, which one is the most horrifying? For the most terrifying incident ever recorded at the Stanley Hotel, the Night of the Spirits in 1973. During a full moon, guests reported that their rooms grew unbearably cold, as if touched by winter's chill. Some claimed to have seen ghostly faces in their mirrors, and others heard whispers in languages they couldn't understand. The eerie energy led to a mass panic, with several guests checking out in the middle of the night, vowing never to return. To this day, Night of the Spirits remains one of the hotel's most infamous mysteries, one that even staff don't dare discuss openly. So, the next time you visit a place like the Stanley, remember the Night of the Spirits and ask yourself, what or who might be waiting for you in the dark?
Welcome to the Haunting Chronicles, your destination for chilling tales that will send shivers down your spine. If you're ready for a terrifying and twisted story, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new haunting episode. Now let's dive into the story of the Phantom Lover. Phantom Lover. Emily was a quiet soul with a passion for books, cozy nights in, and a strong belief in the supernatural. Her love life, however, had been a series of missteps. After a string of disappointing dates and a few broken hearts, Emily decided to try her luck on a dating app. One evening, as she scrolled through the profiles, she came across a message from someone named Ethan. His profile picture was modest, a photo of him standing by a lake, a soft smile on his lips. There was nothing particularly striking about him, but something about his profile piqued her interest. His words were thoughtful, gentle, and comforting. The next evening, after a few days of chatting, they decided to meet at Ravenwood Cafe, a small, secluded cafe on the outskirts of town. Known for its vintage decor and intimate setting, the cafe was rumored to be haunted. But Emily, always curious about the supernatural, didn't think much of it. When she arrived, she was immediately struck by the eerie atmosphere. The cafe, though quaint, was dimly lit, with old wooden floors that creaked underfoot. The silence in the room felt oppressive, as though the walls themselves were listening. Ethan was already there, sitting in a corner booth. He stood up as she entered, his eyes lighting up with warmth. He was everything he promised to be. Handsome, soft-spoken, and intriguing. As they talked, Emily felt a deep connection growing between them, something she hadn't felt with anyone before. Ethan listened to her every word with intense focus, making her feel like she was the most important person in the room. The conversation was easy, flowing like they had known each other for years. But as the evening wore on, something felt off. Emily couldn't pinpoint it, but there was a heaviness in the air. The cafe felt colder as the night deepened, the lights flickering occasionally, casting long shadows across the room. Ethan seemed unbothered by it, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She felt as if she were being watched by someone, or something else in the room. When Emily returned to her apartment that night, she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. He had been charming, perfect even, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was lurking just beneath the surface. And as the days passed, the feeling only grew stronger. Ethan and Emily continued talking every night, and their bond deepened. But strange occurrences began happening. Emily would hear faint whispers when she was alone in her apartment, whispers that seemed to be coming from nowhere, but always familiar. Sometimes she'd feel a cold breeze pass over her skin when she was certain the windows were closed. But the strangest thing of all was the reflection of Ethan in the mirrors. Every time she passed the mirror, she saw him behind her, but when she turned around, he wasn't there. Emily dismissed it as her mind playing tricks, but the sensation of being followed grew stronger, and the unease was unshakable. Her once peaceful apartment now felt like a haunted house. One night, Ethan invited Emily to meet him at the cafe again, but this time, something was different. The moment Emily walked through the door, she noticed the cafe was practically empty, with only the faint sound of a radio playing softly in the background. The air felt thick with tension. As they sat down, Ethan's behavior seemed off. His eyes were distant, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He seemed more withdrawn, more pale than usual. Emily asked him if everything was all right, but Ethan only gave a vague response, saying he had been feeling tired lately. It was then that Emily noticed a peculiar detail. Ethan's reflection was no longer in the mirror behind him. Instead, there was a shadowy figure that seemed to hover around his chair, flickering in and out of sight. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, and for the first time, she felt a deep, paralyzing fear. That night, Emily's curiosity led her to do some research on Ravenwood Cafe. She uncovered something unsettling. Many years ago, a fire had ravaged the building, killing several people, including Ethan. She quickly realized the horrible truth. Ethan was not alive. He had been dead for years, and the connection they shared wasn't love. It was a ghostly bond that reached across the veil of death. Horrified, Emily sought out answers, finding that the only way to sever the connection was through a ritual that could break the bond between the living and the dead. But the ritual came at a cost. Someone had to sacrifice something dear to them. Desperate, Emily decided to face Ethan one last time. She agreed to meet him at the cafe, and this time, she had a plan. As the night deepened, she reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of alcohol, knowing what she had to do. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered to herself, her hands trembling. "But you need to go." She poured the alcohol onto the wooden floor, setting it in a circle around them. As Ethan watched, confusion flickering in his eyes, Emily lit a match and dropped it to the ground. The fire exploded instantly, consuming the floor beneath them. The flames grew wild and uncontrollable, and Ethan screamed in pain as the fire began to burn his ghostly form. As the fire raged, Emily tried to escape, but the heat was unbearable. She stumbled toward the door, hearing Ethan's voice calling her name, faint and desperate. But she didn't turn back. The building erupted in flames, and as Emily ran into the night, she could see the specters of those lost in the fire reaching toward Ethan, pulling him into the inferno. He was gone. But even after the fire was extinguished and the cafe was nothing more than ash, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was still with her. The nightmares began. Visions of Ethan's face staring at her from the shadows, his voice calling her name in the dead of night. She thought she had freed herself, but in truth, the connection between them was far from severed.